Hello, welcome to the Express Technical Committee meeting for July 31st. Here from the committee is myself, Doug Wilson, and we have Wes. Yeah, we're going to start off with a few topics on our agenda. We're going to kind of like continue some of the items from the June 26th meeting. We need to talk about some participation details with the package maintenance working group that's part of the Node.js project. And we'll get some details here. And then we'll get into some more technical topics, as time permitted, which would be things like a proposal for the request prototype and stuff around that, which kind of extends to just, one of the core goals about our org, which is, trying to share more code across, more projects in Node. So I'll move over to Wes to kick off the package maintenance working group discussion, as he's been our main representative to the working group. Go ahead, Wes.
Awesome. So we submitted, after the conversation at the last meeting, the questions. They had like a survey just to see what things we needed support with. So both us and the other pilot group, MQTT.js, had basically the exact same thing. It's like triaging issues takes a ton of time. We need help with people, doing that. So partly as that, and then partly from a offline conversation I had with Michael Dawson, who is on the Node core stuff. He does a lot with a bunch of different JavaScript related groups. What we could do to concretely help people be better about triaging and help and getting on board so it's not just triaging, but it's like that early phase of all the pull requests and issues. So trying to make that a little bit easier. So the plan that we talked about was sort of a 3-part thing. We would provide some guidance on how to get onboarded with triaging. So I think there's a few things with that. One would be maybe we go through the contributing docs and figure out if there's anything we can add there, which I think they're pretty good, but I think maybe we need to promote them more. Anyway, I don't know exactly what the answer is there. But then the more concrete thing is provide a list of issues that are new or in need of discussion or help. So we already use 2 tags, discuss and question, in the main Express repo. And I think we use it slightly in other ones. So my goal there was if we could get just a small bit of automation that just pulls that list together from all the Express repos and then displays it maybe on a page on the website, is what my thought was, that we would guide people to. So from the package maintenance working group, they have a bunch of people who signed up who are basically like, hey, I'm here to help. What's the most important thing I could help with? So that the package maintenance group would then point people to our page that would have this list of issues needing triage. So maybe, and I don't know, Doug, if you have any other ideas on how we could improve that, but I was thinking maybe one other addition would be if we could come up with a good way that somebody could mark it as triaged or something. So I don't know on GitHub if we can let users tag things, unless, if we have to give them permission on something. I'm just not sure what the level of involvement is there, if we just want random people to come help.
Well, yeah, I think we do, especially, I think we probably do need some more labels added probably to some of these things. But yeah, like GitHub, to add labels, I'm sure you're familiar with, because I had to do it on some repos, is like, unfortunately, they don't have like a separate permissions and you have to be part of the org, but there is a pseudo workaround if we really want to. And
Okay.
that is with a bot. What I mean by that is, you've probably seen it in some really big repos where basically they set up a bot that if certain people comment something like slash label something or whatever, then the bot will add the label or whatever that is.
Hmm.
We can set up potentially a bot. Now there are also bots where things like I'm like, so there's this whole class of bots. I forget what it's called, but it's like that's the thing where it's like stale bot and this bot and that bot. I think it's all the same bot, but still.
Is it like Renovate? Is
No.
that the no? Okay, I think that's a different one. That's one that submits PRs
Oh,
for like updating dependencies, I guess.
let me see. Because I've been thinking about, some of those bots, like stale bot, because we have that. I think that will just help take care of like routine stuff.
Hmm.
Let me just look at the stale bot here because it's a class of like a few bots. Basically, stale bot just basically just marks issues as stale, and it's like, oh, nothing's really happened in here. Obviously say, it's called
Hmm.
the generic framework's called ProBot. That's what it is, and it helps automate your workflow. So what I'm thinking of, if we want to, get something rolling, like even just something like we could potentially set up a bot where, like, as soon as someone submits a new issue, for example, it could auto label it somehow to show up and then unlabel as soon as there's any new response, for example. So that
Yeah,
kind
that would
of,
be awesome.
yeah, and I get it. Obviously, GitHub tells you if there's a response or not, but I think that have the label pops out when you look at the issues list. Plus, like to your idea, right? Like we could potentially use that label to drive some other things as well.
Hmm.
Um, and it could also only remove the label if certain people comment rather than any person comment. If we want to do that, we'd have to figure out the details. But
Yeah, I think there's a few opportunities. I don't like excluding people by default, but I do think that it would be very easy for somebody to come in and just be like, oh, triaged, even though it's not. Um, we'd have to figure out what the right line is there.
right, we would. Yeah, and like how to do that is kind of like a hard thing, right? Like it makes me wonder if these bots potentially have something. So, like for example, a completely automated solution might be like, assuming we're not going to add, you could just make it open for anybody, right? So like you could have some way where like people, it might not allow you to label it anything, like it's restricted to only certain things potentially, but like anybody could change certain labels, for example, through
Hmm.
comments. That's their potential. Another potential could be like, anybody who has one of those badges. So those badges are the members, the owners, people who have things that have landed, like commits that have
Hmm.
landed. I wish there was more. There's not really, I don't think, one that's like frequently comments in the repo though. Um,
Yeah, and one thing we would have as a challenge is I think just because somebody hasn't landed a commit on the Express repo, right,
correct.
doesn't mean that they like are not contributing. They could be just doing
Exactly.
all of their contributions in something else, and that would still be, uh, a fine
Right. And that's
thing.
and unfortunately, it's like I don't think GitHub builds something to recognize that I'm aware of. And that'd be awesome if it did. But so like, so the only way we could do that, for example, would be if the bot allowed you to say, oh, this person has, made X number of comments within X time frame or something. And that would just be an automatic like added to the list kind of thing. Basically like, oh, you build up a little bit of a history and then you can start doing it kind of thing. So
Right.
that would, for example, the only way people could drive by abuse that would be they would have to make a ton of comments, and then we'd probably have like at minimum has to be like some like the smallest window would have to be like, say it was like you made 10 comments in our repo, in the last, 30 days, but you know, at least one of them has to have been at least, like 10 days ago or something like that. And that would at least,
Hmm.
like, obviously that's just, I'm just pulling up some random stuff here, but the idea for that minimum there, that 10 window, for example, that would prevent someone from drive by, like never came here before, suddenly spewed a bunch of stuff and then, started doing some labels or whatever, like while
Hmm.
people are sleeping kind of thing, before anybody realizes what's happening. mean, in the end, labels are just labels, so it's not like
Yeah, as far as labels go, I feel like starting open and waiting until somebody abuses it is probably
right,
reasonable. Um,
exactly.
I am looking at the source here for the auto labeler in Probot.
Yeah,
It's super straightforward, and if we wanted to do something that was this, except with a little bit extra rules, we could fork it and absolutely get that running. So,
yep. And I believe like things like the stale bot and stuff like this are already there for you running on a server. Where like the pro bot, you can customize whatever you want, and
mhm,
then of course you have to run it somewhere. But they have a whole bunch. Like if you go to probot.github.io/apps, it has like a whole bunch of the things people have made with Probot that you can just
mhm.
use. So like there's, I think, did you say the issue labeler?
Yeah, that was the one I was looking at the source for. But yeah, I mean, here there's PR triage.
Yeah, and like as you
Yeah,
see,
maybe.
like they
Go
say
ahead.
like installation, like you can configure it with like .github/labeler.yaml, and so
Yep.
you can even you can see like you can exclude labels, so that way people can't just label it or whatever.
Yep. Yeah. It doesn't. I don't see anything about users in here, but again, like, and we could also maybe work with them and just say, hey, here, we'd like to start using these on Express. Can you, what do we need to do to get these couple of features in? I'm sure they'd be open.
Right, and we could probably even like contribute them in
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Which I'd be happy to do for sure. So I think that's great if we can get a little setup around that just we can test out, even maybe not on the Express repo if we're worried about getting started, and maybe put it somewhere else that is pretty active, maybe in session or something like that.
Yeah, or even
um,
like while we're configuring it, we can easily just make a repo that we can just play with it,
mhm,
make a few issues, make sure it works, and then yeah, we can like slap it on. Yeah, because I think out of all the repos, right, like some of the most, so there's a few repos, right, when we talk about triage for that have the most inbound things. So the main Express repo, the session repo,
mhm,
the cores repo, the CSURF repo, and I think that that's the ones that jump out on my head. And the reason why those get a lot is one, the Express repo is Express, so a lot of people post things there in general. As you see, we've seen that even just recently, sometimes not even related to Express, just because what Express is to everybody it's not really always clear when you're starting out, so it makes sense. And then the reason session, cores, and CSURF pop up is because those are finicky, difficult to configure things, especially when you don't really understand it. And that's, I think, the biggest reason like they have lots of issues come up. So there's always a lot of incoming issues, and some of them, you know, it's like, oh, it's not working. Like, here's like my app, and it says like a ton of code, and it could very well be a legitimate issue. It's really hard to know without like reading through it. And so those are definitely the difficult ones. And out of those four, I think session and then followed by Express have the most likely that to have someone who's like not on the TC then comment as a reply to one of those things. Um,
mhm.
but yeah, so I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. I think that would be uh, probably the highest impact thing that would take things off of, especially your plate, because you follow more of the repos. But everybody's, it would give better support to the community, as well as taking things off. Um, you know, I say our plates, but mostly yours, because mine, I'm mostly just doing it in the Express repo at the moment. So
right, but still, yeah. And I was going to say like body parser, I think would be the next one out of those.
yeah, yeah.
It
Well,
does
well,
happen most often.
so what I would like to do, so I'll do a little bit of research into the labeling bots and stuff, and then so part of what the package maintenance working group is doing is hopefully finding some things that work for us that they can then recommend and get some default setups for others. So I'll maybe work with the package maintenance working group and see if any of them want to help get it set up for our apps. because then again, the point of here is that they want to help us. We don't need to be doing everything. We can say, here's the thing we want to be done, and they'll then send somebody off and go do it.
Yeah.
So,
And yeah, because I think, I mean, and just to make sure that we talked a lot about the labels, but you do think that the labels actually will help, I assume, right?
Yeah. So the thing was, I think the labels are the start, and I think the second step is having a single place, not because part of our problem is that we have so many repos that are spread across 3 organizations that when they asked me where should somebody go to look, I said, well, go to these, 3 organizations and follow all the repos. It's like, well, that's not very helpful especially to somebody who's just getting on board. So like,
right.
For you or I, it's fine to be following all of these threads because sometimes it's easy. We have enough context to know, oh, I can ignore that email, or, that notification is not something I care about right now. But a new person, they won't know, right? So they need to be a slower onboarding. So my thought would be that if they have a page they can go to where we centralize these labeled issues from the 40 repos we have or however many there are in one page, then they can maybe they'll have a better chance of finding one they care about, or that they can help with. So the labels is the start. The second step would be taking those labels and then making a page that has all the repos we have where all those labeled issues are in one spot. So and so to that note, I have the start of something that pulls. It's basically kind of like one of the. I think he's like a dev advocate for Microsoft. He built a good first issue tool. So I took some of his code and basically made something that goes through all of our repos and finds issues with certain labels. It's basically the same as his code, except his works on one repo and mine works on a list of repos. And then basically it'll take that information and turn it into this list. I haven't finished the view part of it yet, but I've got just the part that actually pulls the issues.
Gotcha.
So my thought was we start adding these issues. If we can do that in an automated fashion, great. Even if we can't, but it looks like we can. But even if we can't, we at least can have a page that just literally lists out, all the issues with these specific labels.
Right.
So that's the first step. So is the triage. That's like the first level where like people who are totally new to the project and just want to help, we can send them to those. The second level, are we ready to move on to that?
Yep.
Okay. So the second level is the top issues. So the top issues are the things where somebody who either feels like they're competent enough to contribute at a bigger scale, they're not just there to talk about it, they're really there to like help push some code forward.
Uh-huh.
That's what the top issues would be for. So I have a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that I thought of as top issues. I meant to post them and it totally slipped my mind. But my thought was we could make a repo that has the top issues listed in it. And then the status page thing would also just pull from that and take those and list those out and say, if you want to contribute to the things the Express team thinks are the most important right now, go here. So I have a list. I can post the links in the chat. Maybe the top one obviously is the 5.0 release right now.
And like you were thinking, so like one, I would say like, that's another probably place where we can like have a specific label for labeling that, so that way we can aggregate it. But also, like you're even thinking like we could make like another kind of like analogous to the discussions repo or something like in the Express.js org, and actually make specific issues in there. Is that what you meant?
Well, so now that we've talked through this whole label process, maybe actually labels would be the best approach to this as well. If we had a label that was top priority or something.
Especially if like what you're saying, right? We had some way to aggregate it. Now, by aggregate it, we could do like, it doesn't have to be super fancy at first, right? Like we could do something analogous to the badge board, where basically it doesn't auto update, right? Like we have to run something and like push it. But I think like, the things probably don't move constantly. So I think, if it's slightly outdated, I think that would be
I
fun.
completely agree, and that's actually what I started building. So
Cool.
the intent was that it's just like the badge board, except more than just, so the one shortcoming of the badge board code base is that it's only on a GitHub organization level.
Right.
So when we have 3 organizations, so the changes I've made are effectively taking this good first issue style code, merging it with the badge board style code, and then making it support repos arbitrarily. So it doesn't matter what organization they're in. We just give it the full repo link, and then it knows how to figure it out from there.
Cool.
So that can go across organizations. So yeah, so I think that's actually a better solution, just instead of having a thing where we PR it, which was my first thought. Just having tags, as long as we standardize the tag across the whole
Right.
ecosystem, we just, it'll work the same way.
Yep. And they are supposed to be standard. So like you probably noticed like pretty much all our repos have the same tags. Like they're all supposed to be standard. So and they're
Okay,
supposed
well,
to be the same.
they're supposed to be, and I don't think we
Right.
have discrepancies. I just think there's some repos where the tags aren't defined or aren't being used. So if we just
Right.
started using those in those, it would solve the problem. I only noticed that because I started running this tool and seeing what tags we have, and a bunch of them just don't have
Yep.
the tags, which is fine, easy to create. So
But
that's the second level.
I just wanted to say that that is a goal, though, is that they're all supposed to
Mhm.
have, same tags and same colors for the same tags.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, maybe we should. Do we have a document on that somewhere?
I'm trying to remember from back in the day. So like Jeremiah had actually had a little tool that created all the tags. So that's actually
Oh,
why a lot of them are, synced.
do you happen to know where that is?
I don't offhand, but I don't think it
Okay.
was like his own custom thing. So I have to look.
Mhm.
But yeah, like I know like one notable tag is really the awaiting more info. I started adding that. So that one
Mhm.
definitely won't be everywhere. Then there's a couple repos. Then there's a few repos that have just the standard GitHub tags. They don't have all those other ones. Um,
Mhm.
so, but they're supposed to all have the same. So like, that helps us allow out with like stuff like this for sure. Like where we, make this thing. Because the other thing, like, I saw in the package working group, I think that this will be actually much better than having like one of the things there, which was to have just like a top tens issue, like a meta issue, and then we like keep updating it there. Because one, that would mean that, say, for example, I think that having labels just in various ways helps, including like empowering people to like put the label, say like over time, like there's people do things with repos and they want to put the label, then it's not like everybody has to have write permission to this one place and all that coordination. And so it's kind of like, yeah, definitely pretty nice. And, you can do just GitHub searches, right? Like you can do like in the GitHub search, like org:/Express.js, label : whatever. And it just pops them up.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. No, I think that allows a lot more flexibility, and users discoverability. They can come in from any direction, right? If they know about GitHub labels, then they might just find it in GitHub and be like, "Oh, look, my issue got a label of top priority. Awesome." Or or needs more info. Like I think it's really easy for discoverability if we go that route. Yeah.
yep.
So
Um,
cool. So that's the top issues thing. So I like that. I have a list of, like I said, I have a list of 5 or 6 that I have right now. I'll post those in the notes or whatever on the issue after. I don't think we need to, I mean, unless you want to go through them. Basically, it's the 5.0, HTTP2, 5.0 docs, and then TypeScript support. Those are the ones that, and I think there's the router 2.0 releases in there as well.
Gotcha. In fact, I mean, even just talking about those, right? I think like, thinking about like, say, a call for external people to help out with, right? Like out of all of those, TypeScript, to my mind, shoots the top. And the reason it does
Totally, yeah.
is because I don't know if you're like a TypeScript expert. I certainly am not, let alone I'm not a user, right? So that's always the
Yeah.
problem. Like I might be able to look at how TypeScript works, but not being a user is kind of like a detriment. Like it's like what I've talked about, like, internally at like companies before with like making, libraries that you publish. Like, you can't, if you don't write Python, like, and you write a Python library for your product, Python users might use it and be like, what is this? Like, the
Yeah.
naming convention is weird and how it works seems weird for me as a Python user. So like, we really like that. And that's the reason that stands out at the top, is because out of everything, we don't really have, like, we really need like a TypeScript champion. And the reason we need that is because it's more than just, I wrote TypeScript definitions and I landed them, see ya, right? Because like, we're going to change API, we're going to do stuff like, and we kind of need, some kind of champion who will help us with it, because I'm sure we can figure out how to like, tweak, the definition file. Sure, no real probably issue there, but whatever the intricacies are with TypeScript, or like the better way to use it, I've never really, like, as a good example, I understand the basics, like obviously just describe, the types that your thing takes. But there's things that I don't really understand that the TypeScript community certainly seems to understand more about, like, how do you export like a type for other people to extend it, and like, what is the best practice there, and like, do people expect that or not expect that? And like, I learned that sometimes people want an actual type for options and like export that type or whatever. And so I don't know.
And one thing that surprised me was that people install the types not as development dependencies, but as actual dependencies. Like, I would never have guessed that. But that's apparently what people do.
Yeah, and of
So
course, yeah, and how that will actually, and how that kind of stuff works, right? Like, so some of the libraries, like say, especially in JSACP, where they don't really have dependencies, right? Like, if they have a TypeScript definition file, they're probably just that. But like, one thing I don't understand is like, say Express, right? And like, part of its API is like, serve statics API. Like, does it have to do anything special for that? Like, how does that interact, and things like that. So I think that's why, to me, out of all those issues, thinking in both what's important and especially what's, an external person contribute the best. Obviously, it's not saying like, if you can't do this, get out of here, right?
right.
But that, to me, like, definitely jumps out, because we know people want it, and I get why they want it. Um, and I certainly get like saying like, oh, well, if you want to use TypeScript, I guess come up with your own TypeScript definition. Like, no one wants to do that. I'm sure it's probably tedious as crap. It might work at first, but then all it will do is quickly, like, they'll probably get it just enough for it, like, to compile correctly, but it won't help them in things like what you might expect it to help you. So if like they switch to a new version of Express, say like from 4 to 5, say 4 had it and 5 had it, then they would switch it and then be like, up, a whole bunch of stuff wouldn't compile. So then they'd quickly be able to like at least get rid of all the compiler errors, and then maybe their app would run after that, or maybe it wouldn't, who knows. But at least that, that I know that's always an upgrade path when you have a typed system. So
Yeah, I think that would actually be, so the third category is our top 3 like initiatives or whatever, and that's where we said like the idea was those we would choose a champion for. And I actually think that is not only a top issue, but I think is a top priority across the whole org. So I think that would fit in the third category, which is getting champions for our top, again, it could be more than 3, but our top like bigger picture things, right?
right,
So the TypeScript support across all the repos, what is our opinion on how they're published, who maintains them, like that stuff. And I totally agree. I'm not the person for it. I don't think we have, like, I guess Blake would be the closest to that, because I know he does some TypeScript stuff, but I don't know how he wants his level of involvement to be
right,
these days in that. But even so, even his opinions, he only really comments on them in like the router and path to regex. We need somebody who's going to champion it across all the repos. So, and I think there's people out there who would love to do this, because TypeScript people tend to want to get everybody else to use TypeScript.
right. And like I said, I have no issue, publishing a TypeScript definition file along
Mhm.
with all our repos. I don't see why, I don't see any harm in that in any way. And all it would
Yeah.
help, it helps especially with us, right? Because think about it. the main way people use TypeScript is they'll pull down those, basically community definitions from there, which, and I've seen people complain about it before, like they might be wrong in certain ways. And, unless we sit there and watch them, we don't really know. And, this kind of like, that's the biggest reason why people ask for them to be added here. I usually don't see it as like, they're not usually asking to like prevent downloading an extra dependency. I think they're usually asking because they feel like that will somehow make them better quality, which I don't disagree. But of course, we don't know how to do that. That doesn't really help. It'd just be the same community things. And it might actually be more painful because then if it's wrong, then like we have to update it and then publish a new version where the only thing is the definition or something like that. Queue, all the dependencies down the line too, potentially. Say if it was messed up in, some couple levels deep or something.
Yep. I think that's a great, TypeScript is a great example of where this is going to be very helpful. And so that's why I think that should definitely be probably one of the top 3 priorities. I think the other 2 being, in my opinion, I think 5.0 should take the top spot still. And then I am not sure what the third one would be. If we even need a third one, maybe we only have 2 top priorities right now. But the idea with the top priorities is they're more overarching. There might be 100 issues underneath them, right? They're just goals instead of necessarily being specific issues. So.
Yep.
And then the goal would be the status page lists all 3, and then the package maintenance working group, when they have people coming to volunteer, which again we have a bunch of, that would be where we would send them. We would say, go here. Everything you need to know is on this page. Click the issue links and start triaging, or click the issue links and contribute. If you have a really great direction for the TypeScript and you are a TypeScript person, jump in.
Yep. But yeah. Yeah, go ahead and, I take your full list and like paste them in, this meetings thing as well. So that way we'll have them there. But otherwise, yeah. So just to summarize up a couple things is like, I think we'll look at some of these like bots for helping with labels and whatever, and probably we'll make a new label for these to track these top issues, so we can better expose them. And
then I would also ask, just on that note, if you could also go through, because like I've said, you follow a lot more of the repos, you'll have more context on what the important things are and some of those. If you could add to it, because like I said, I only have 6 here, and I just knew that there's more. Right.
Yep. I'll definitely take a look as well, about anything that's any other ones that I see that seems to be missing. Like I said, I think your list is really a jumping off point, and labels makes it really flexible, and even without that site that you're talking about, that site generator being done, like even before, we don't even have to wait for that to see it, because we can just use the GitHub search to just see what they are, as we're getting that set up. So yeah, I think, was that it for the working group, you think?
Yeah, I think that was. So there was the thing that got brought up that one of the members of the working group has some work in progress on. Well, we had that as a separate line item, didn't we? The publishing automation stuff with the 2FA.
Yeah, so I didn't actually. I know that was brought up. I didn't really add it as a line item, but that was, since we're starting with just trying to get the package working group stuff out of the way. So that was because as you're aware, right? Like package, publishing right now, is just manual as running npm publish. Really, technically, it's run npm pack and then list out the tarball contents to validate that they look right and then publish it, because as an extra check. And the only reason you have to kind of do that is just because it's the fear that your environment, local environment is dirty, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's one of, I think, the ideas of having the CI do it, is because it can be a reproducible environment. That's the whole,
Yep.
because it starts from a clean slate every time.
So actually, let me jump off there really quick. There was another thing, and it was related to getting some infrastructure to run that type of CI. So if we were to do that today, obviously we'd probably end up paying for it out of our pockets if we can't find an open source solution. But we could propose to, so as a member org of the JSF Cross Project Council, which is the other group that I've been attending the meetings for, one of their goals is to help connect projects with people who want to support in ways that might be maybe even financial. And in this case, if we wanted to just do it ourselves, we could pay for it with maybe some funding from one of these groups, or they may have somebody who just wants to offer up hardware to do something like that. So if so the guy who I should get his name, Dominic, I guess, or Dominicos, I guess. I don't know how to pronounce it for sure, but he, I think, is working with Nearform. So and I know they provide some hosting stuff. Anyway, there might be groups who are willing to just give us some servers if we wanted to run some of our own automation.
Yeah, and usually those are the easiest. Those are a lot of times the easiest way for people to, companies to contribute stuff to things, is to give, rather than give actual money, is to give basically essentially you can think of it as service credits, right?
Yep.
So whether that means literally they're giving you some kind of credits in a system and then you have an account that then utilizes those credits, or it's literally just here's this server that we have billing on our thing that just you have access to set whatever up. But yeah, I was thinking about that. I knew that was the exact problem. For example, when he was talking about the OID, the token stuff for validating. I realized in there, and he did say it too, that you would have to have at least some kind of server it would go to. I doubt there's anything that open source exists right now, since it's still very new. But yeah, how to running that. I was actually thinking about it too, and there's also an intermediate possibility where we could, even without this, if we wanted to set it all up, where basically it could then do an npm pack, generate that tarball file, and then upload or send the tarball somewhere, and then it would still require someone to manually do npm publish that tarball. But at least at that point, the npm client is basically uploading that tarball as it was. So that would be kind of an in-between kind of thing. So it kind of be it's automated, but not really. So really what you do is you get the benefits of having it be on a clean environment or whatever. Because especially with the 2FA, I see it all the time. I follow some of the Node.js working groups, security working group, for example, and the package maintenance working group. And I forget which one it is. It could be the security one, where there's continued talk about ideas about, expose, should we expose, whether or not a package was published with 2FA through the npm site and blah, blah, blah. Someone even went as far as to say, oh, well, if you do an npm install, it should by default not even install a version that wasn't 2FA, which, whatever. But still,
obviously would be tough to adopt, but
right. Yeah. But the general sentiment seems to be people are certainly begging to at least show if 2FA was involved in the publish or not. So it seems obviously the traditional automation, which is to turn 2FA off for the publishes, seems backwards at this point. And that's the only reason I mentioned that, because out of anything, I think that's that would be the main concern I would have. But it sounds like I didn't even know that the npm like client took a dash dash OTP argument and then allowed you to actually pass in like the token you wanted to just type in the command line. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, I've used that a few times. It's nice if you're not in a like if you're just trying to run it without having it like have wait and then prompt you if you know you need it. So anyway, I think there's some opportunity there for. I would hate to do extra work to hack together a solution that wasn't a good long-term one. I just don't know if that's really worth it since we don't have new people like, I mean, other than the fact that I would like to be involved in publishing just to be there for it, just to say I know how to do it if it was a pinch, and not that I don't know how to do it, but just, having gone through the process and having access and all that stuff. But other than like me, I'm not sure there's a lot of people out there who are like, yeah, I'd be helping to publish and do that tomorrow. So if it takes us a couple of weeks, or a month or something to get a more robust setup, I don't think that's a big problem. To me, I think that's fine. And if that is, so I did look a little bit through his code in Optic. It's there's a lot of setup and I'm not entirely sure. And then it's like, you need Firebase. And I'm like, well, I just don't really, I don't care to do that. So I'm not sure. I was going to look at the actual implementation details and see if, there was something that we could pull from it, or maybe we can work with him to get it set up. Anyway, the point was as soon as I started reading the instructions, I was like, well, I'm not going to do this tonight. And so I have left it since then. But if he's willing to, him or somebody else on the package maintenance working group side, willing to get it set up, and then also maybe fund it somehow, if that is via, maybe somebody maybe somebody at AWS or Microsoft or one of those companies that actually just provides hardware wants to support the project. Maybe they could donate it. And then he could just get it set up in one of those environments. I think what we'd want is us to get the credentials and manage the credentials, but then, they could, set up this tool, and the actual publish automation, and then we could just maybe vet it. Obviously we wouldn't, again, run that on the Express repo right away, but, something else, maybe a test repo. For the first few times and then see how it works. If we could do that in the next like month, I think, or even, even longer, to be honest, because again, it's not like people are like, hey, I want publish rights. However long it takes, I think it'd be a good thing to go for the full solution.
Right. I mean, just in general, I mean, part of like, if you talk about like automation for publishing, it's more than, to me at least, it's more than just the rights to publish, right? I think like, providing stuff around that can help provide more assurances, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is, ignore, not like saying like, oh, someone, is going to publish rights and they'll like, manually inject some bad code or something in there during the publish. Not really that. Obviously, people can be concerned about that, but more like just that it's not accidental mistakes, I guess is what you could say. So like, if automation could even like say, because how like, and a lot of the bigger repos like Express, I make, for right now, just minor, mainly because there's no automation around it, so there's not really always a need. There's that PR, right, for a release. So like, you could have it where like it says you make the PR for the release, and then like it, to actually get it published, you have to have like, say at least 2 people have to sign off on it, for example, and then like it all just happens, and by just happens, whatever that means, but basically like, the extra assurance there is like now you at least have, at least one person and one other person says, yep, we think that, this is something that, not only is like the semverness of whatever is in there correct or whatever, that at least we feel like it is, and so you have just extra, eyeballs on it. So then inevitably, when you do some release and people are like, X broke me or Y broke me or whatever, it's like, then it doesn't end up turning into like a game of like, well, X published it and I didn't agree with that or other nonsense like that. So, those are all kind of things that help.
Yeah, I think that is a great point. And if we had a trigger in the automation that was based off that, looked at a specific label again that said like, release PR or something like that, and then automated the actual publish, I think that would be great. So to me, that seems like that would be another thing where we should put it on the top priorities list. Maybe open an issue and say build automation, and then set some people on that task.
Right, because
which I'd like to be involved in that, if only just to understand the system and make sure I know what's going on. But I don't feel the need to be the one writing the integration if somebody else is passionate and knows what they're doing.
Yep, because I mean, think about it, right? Like a lot of the stuff we use is just whatever the open source tooling is, right? Like we're not trying to go too crazy off the deep end, in the crazy custom stuff. I know I've seen other big projects where that is a criticism they have currently of the GitHub flow, is that it has nothing along those lines. Like for example, there's no way to they added branch protection, but they don't have what, quote unquote, like say tag protection. So, no one's prevented from pushing up like say tags, which, actually is almost like more important than branch protection, because branches are expected to move, but usually if someone pulls a tag down, it's not expected that it will get moved, including deleted. Git itself doesn't try to rectify it. And so that's actually almost like more important to protect, prevent accidental tag creation, like especially annotated tags. But still, and I talk about tags because of course that's what usually is linked to our versions, versus anything else. So, but I don't know, just, you have stuff like that. I don't know where I'm going with it.
And with that stuff, we would also, so I guess, doing if GitHub doesn't support something like protected tags, we wouldn't be able to solve that.
Right. Yeah. I'm not saying that we have to have that. I'm just talking about, like, as you see, there is this gap, I think, in the general open source, which is, I guess that's what my point was trying to be, was like, more like the point where it's like, we don't, other people can certainly, if that's what they like to do, but I mean, I'm glad to use whatever that they would have to offer, you know what I mean? Like when you're talking about like hands off, obviously, like you said, to understand it, but like besides that, it's just like, it's not like we couldn't use Travis CI until we built Travis CI, for example. Like, it just is what it is, and we just use it. Having stuff like that for some of this other stuff would be pretty neat.
Maybe Travis CI is the solution for this. Again, I don't actually really care what the solution is, as long as we like the workflow, and the workflow is easy for us to add more people to. So
right. And as far as like release goes, like, and management of things, like the way the tags are, I mean, that was like the biggest thing with like some of the stuff with semantic release, though I think it's better now, is like, it was hard to change it to work with the current flow. And of course we could change the flow, but then like that's a bunch of work for no real thing. And it makes like it look weird when you look back in the release history. So
I actually did set up semantic release like a week or two ago, and I am skeptical of the project a bit. So I'm not like, yeah, let's do semantic release, but I do think the semantic commit messages or whatever, there's a format that semantic release does. I think that's great. I think the tool could use some work. But that's, me maybe being more opinionated than I need to be. So So I like the idea of maybe going to there is actually, they have like a validator for the commit message. If we started using that and then built up automation around like a lighter weight automation around that stuff, I think that would be good. Like maybe just that it checks that the commits on a like lineup, like it doesn't automatically version, like we wouldn't use the automated versioning thing, but it just like did a pre-publish hook that just said if any of the commits don't look like they belong in this version, like if it was a patch version, and there was a thing that said minor in it, it just said whoa whoa whoa, are you sure, kind of thing. I think something like that would be a good start and maybe all we ever would need.
Yeah, and like, so we actually did something like that where I worked with, GitHub Enterprise Edition, and that was actually super easy to do. Actually, with just using the webhooks,
Mm-hmm.
the webhook system, where basically, yeah, we had like a little server up there, like got the webhooks, and the webhooks told you everything, like literally this very specific list of the commits with their metadata, like messages and authors and stuff like that. So you could like do a check like that, and
Mm-hmm.
then of course if it fails it. Another nice thing is, of course, it's really easy to tell that it failed because of that versus like,
Yep.
It was just like, say your build failed and you're like, well, why? And look at the log and you're like, oh, it's because I didn't format my commit right, versus like it actually being any kind of code issue.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, like you could always just look at the logs, but I don't know. It just seemed like it was kind of nicer. And I think like there probably something like that exists out there too, maybe even for free. I haven't, as you see all this, like the stale bot and all those bots, like I feel like there probably has to be something similar for some of these other things too. Um,
Yeah, I agree. You're probably right. I mean, these are not issues that we have uniquely. That's for sure.
yeah.
So
Because I think I saw someone talk about there's some kind of bot that's out there that could even like do stuff like say, hey, it could comment on the issue, but I'm sure, that's at least something. But I wonder if it
yeah,
could.
right here is semantic pull request bot. And so
No.
it checks that the commit messages, so check that ensures that all pull requests follow the conventional commit spec. So, something like that,
Yep.
we could turn on real easy. And then that would at least enforce the commit message formatting.
Yeah.
And then the actual release versioning stuff, we could do automation or not. Again, like I said, I err on the side of caution with just saying, yeah, let the commit message do its thing. I'd rather look at all the commit messages and say, oh yeah, this is definitely a minor. We did this right. uh,
Right. And to me, like there's two things that helps. It just helps with general consistency. So that way, like, no matter what member of the project is doing it, it just seems consistent. So it's not like,
mm-hmm.
X member always makes their commits this way and other Y member always makes them that way. So then when people look at it, they're like, darn it,
Yep.
this looks weird. But then almost like more importantly, just it actually helps people like also better understand in a more like direct way, just how they're supposed to interact with the project. It's the same reason why we run lint in the build, so that way it's kind of like, even though we can say run lint all over the place, I think a lot of people, and I see it all the time because they'll push another commit up that says like fixing lint, they'll realize like because the build fails because of linting, they'll realize, oh yeah, I guess I gotta lint it. It's the same kind of thing, right? It's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
they discover the contributor process, through the actual automation itself. So it just
Yep.
makes some of that more discoverable as well, and then coupled with consistency, which also helps make it less likely that that X thing will get forgotten over time. And then next thing you know, it's like, well, it's out of date. And it's just like, well, why is that out of date? Well, it's just like, well, we just kind of stopped doing X thing. So I guess we'll either need to start doing it or just remove it from the rules. Um, you know, is and like in the end, what's nice about doing it that way is like, ideally what we want to think about and spend our mental energy on is, the code, and not just like, oh yes, did I follow X and Y and Z right? It's like, just let, if the computer can tell us this, it's the same, like a good example. This would, I don't know, where we can do this, but a good example could be, you know, if we continue to follow like, the pattern for, the commit, like say you fix a bug or something like that, and then in the pull request, you also add like the list into the history file or whatever, like a thing just checking that, even if it's as simple as saying like, I don't know, was history modified?
Mm-hmm. Which there is a bot that can add a label based on which files changed. I noticed that. So maybe we could do the same kind of thing and say if it wasn't changed, add a label of needs history or something.
Yeah, because I usually use a label. It's harder with Express repo because its docs are so big, so they live somewhere else. But like a lot of those other repos, like there are some labels you probably see them around. Like I have like labels that I usually have that hang around like needs docs and needs tests.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because I believe there is a bot that can do those. Like, so if you touch a JavaScript file, say, then it says, okay, well, did they touch anything in the test directory? If not, just add that label. And did they touch an MD file? If not, add that label. Sure, like it's not perfect, but at least, like, once again, it's like it gives people hints right away. So like you make a pull request while like a main maintainer of a project is sleeping, they can see that immediate feedback, and then
Yeah, shorten the cycle, because sometimes if they
exactly.
don't get it right away, then they never come back to the PR.
Exactly. So, and I think and that's kind of like what, helps a lot. Like it helps, just by the time that we come to look at it, potentially it has everything already there. Um, but even then, like by the time, it helps people where that cycle, I think there's always the thing where the longer that feedback cycle is, the more people get fatigued with actually committing, because they might be like, oh, I forgot. Yeah, the README. I have to go write that up, and maybe I'll just never get back to that, or something like that, or whatever.
I know that feeling. So,
but yeah, so like I think that's another good idea that's simple but can help. It helps with our, like I said, our own burden too, because then we can like open a PR, and then we already got those labels right in our face that says, at least basic things that are there. So then I think those bots can even make a comment too. So if people
they can, yeah, they can. I do have, actually, this is sort of an operational, or like the actual question about, so editing the history file. You mentioned this, and I don't know if I had heard you say this before. Editing the history file in the PR. Usually the history file is broken down by version. So that would mean that I would have to make a section for the supposed version it would go into in the initial PR. Does that seem like the correct process?
Yeah, so it's usually, and this was because this process was kind of already there when I started taking over like a bunch of this, is that, like, for example, TJ would make the section, it would just be called unreleased. So it kind of like at a glance unreleased changes. And then of course, when you actually go to release it, you would replace that with what the actual version was in the date.
Makes perfect sense. Okay, I will do that on my changes from now on, because I don't think I have done that fully. I definitely haven't done that in the past.
Yeah,
I will also open a PR that adds that to the contributor docs.
Sweet. And yeah, like it may or may not be there, at least for Express. I don't know. We did get a bunch of stuff added in there, but I'm sure there's stuff missing. But like I was going to say, like I even actually just recently, once some of this package maintenance stuff was being talked about, I actually made like a simple little script that just walked through all the repos, and then would actually show me that top line in the history file that's on the master branch. So then I actually, because like a lot of times what would happen, right, I would like merge someone's PR or something, it would sit there unreleased, and then next thing I know, someone's like, oh, hey, when is X going to be released? And it's been sitting in it's been sitting in master for like 3 months, and I didn't release it on accident, because I said, oh, I'm going to merge this real quick. I got to go home. I'll go do it then. I kind of forget about it. And then there's no real trigger that ends up making me go look at it. So I actually made a little thing that walks the repos to show me that line. And so that was because, of course, just having commits on master that are past the tag doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything to actually release yet. So because that was the practice, I had done that. So, but those are kind of like the things that help a lot. And actually that did help me get like a bunch of the crap released out that was just sitting around for a while. So that
do you have that code still?
Yeah, so I have it. It's just a bash script.
So one thing I made a organization on GitHub and NPM that I intend to publish some of these tools under, and the goal would be that it would be a centralized place for specifically tooling that helps Node package maintainers with these kind of things. That seems like a great thing to add to that.
Cool. Yeah, and like it actually, I was just glancing at my script. What it does is it doesn't do it by org. It does it by your own user. So like that was just a simple thing, but like so you basically it does who am I. Otherwise, you can type someone's name in, and it just walks all the packages that's under that username. It's not the greatest. I just thrown that to make it generic, but like you know.
I mean, maybe that's the start, and then we make it a little bit more. Again, the goal of that organization was more to just have a place to put some of these tools that are related and not under my name, because I want to hopefully present them to the package maintenance group and say, look, I'll add you to this org. Let's all work on these together here under one namespace so that people know where to look, as opposed to what is happening right now is there's a couple people who publish things under their own names, myself included. And they're hard to discover. So my thought was if we start collaborating on them under that group, then we have a shared place.
Yep.
So
yeah, and sometimes like I don't always publish them under my own name just because, just like what all happens sometimes is then people will start using them, and then next thing I know that just turns into a thing. People are like,
yes,
and then you've probably seen it. I think I've said it on some of the repos too. Like, sometimes you even try to tell them like, hey, you know what? If you don't really like it, just literally fork it and then just maintain your own. And then it's like, oh, well, I don't really want to maintain my own. And
I want you to do it for me. Yep. Yeah. So I think one of the reasons why I thought the org was a good idea was because then I could reach out to this group of people and say, look, I also don't want to be the only person maintaining some of these things, because I know for a fact that they won't make fast progress if I'm the only one doing them. I've been working on this stinking generator package for the past like 7 months or something, and I'm still not done with it because I don't have time to finish it. So
yeah, and it's of course more than just time, right? It's a passion too. Like I'm sure there are people who would like stuff.
For sure. Yep. Yeah. There's definitely people out there with more passion for some of these aspects than I have. So
yeah. Well,
cool. Yeah, so I think that's like I know we're already over time, but that's the only stuff that I have from the package maintenance and the like, how do we get more involvement front.
Great. So do you have enough right now to be able to give them a response? Because I know that they were asking for.
So I'm gonna post this list, and then if you could, once I post it, I'm just keeping a running thing here that I'll post at the end of the meeting. If you could then go through it and see if there's any clear additions, and then if there are, I will, or when you're done with that, I'll go, and they have like a board on that repo that has some MQTT JS stuff right now. Add our list to that same board. That's the first step. And then the status page thing is one of the other things I have in process. It's not pushed yet. It's on my computer. I need to push that. But I will add this list I will once we have this list, I will then go and, as in the process of making that status page, I will go and add labels to all of these issues with the label.
All right.
Maybe we'll call it top priority, if you like that.
Whatever.
Or top issues. I like top priority because it's not just issues. You know, it could be PRs and
right. Or top of mind, or who knows what.
Even, yeah, exactly. So yeah, so if we're good on that, then I have enough to go.
Or
on
even
there.
just the word top. I don't know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I like top priority only because it's very clear, I think.
Yep. Nothing wrong with it. So but yeah.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So I will look for that. I'm gonna, I will also here right after here, I'll make another schedule for probably. I mean, usually they were 2 weeks. I don't know. Do you think we could wait 2 weeks, or do you think we should do it next week?
I'm fine, since we always go over. I'm fine doing once a week for a little bit so that we get it done, because we haven't talked about the request
Yep. All right.
thing, which I'm fine to continue if you are. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, I'll do one. Then I'll schedule one for August 7th. Obviously, if we find out we're doing it too fast, then obviously we can pull back. But I'll just schedule the next one for August 7th here, and then we'll get that. We'll move on to that next item.
Cool.
And we'll continue down that road here.
Yep, that works. So are we gonna? So we will continue. We'll discuss this.
Yeah, I need to read. I'll try to even before then. Maybe I'll get some time to post some stuff in there as well. Just asynchronously via text as well. So, but cool. We just want to make for sure we don't leave package maintenance working group hanging. When we're looking for them to try to help us out. So
yep. Yeah, and I've been pushing. Since I think there's a few people involved in this that are full time on these types of things. So I've been very slow in answering some of their requests. So it would be nice. Yeah, it's nice that we've gotten a resolution on that, and I can get that to them, because I've been saying, oh, well, I'll get it. I'll post it tomorrow, and then I don't post it tomorrow.
Yep.
And I've said that probably 4 times. So
yeah, very much, especially when we're doing this on the side, is the extreme exaggeration of developers estimating when they'll be finished with something is on the extreme scale here. Because it feels like it's so easy, so you'll get it done, but then it ends up like, oh, it was really busy at work today. Oh, I had to do X, Y this errand, and then I got home and I was pretty tired, so I just kind of did whatever. And the next thing you know, I had to go to sleep, so I didn't get to do anything that night. And
yep, that is the story of my life, especially with the child now. It's
right, exactly.
Much
just
harder,
all kinds of stuff ends up popping up and whatever. So and especially like I said, when you couple it where it's maybe I could do something at work, but then like I said, next thing you know, it might be a really busy day at work, either because of meetings or some issues or whatever, and then you don't do anything there, so then it just boils over. So yeah, that's always what sucks when you say oh, I'll get you that post tomorrow. Yep. But cool. All right. Well, I'll schedule, like I said, I'll schedule the next one for August 7th. I know we didn't get to talk about some of that stuff, but we'll do it then. It's not like can't keep talking forever, but I do have some stuff to do. I'm sure you have some stuff to do, and people have only so long to listen to these things when they listen to them. So
yeah.
Sweet. All right. Well, that will end our technical committee meeting here. So I will go ahead and end this video call.